before you today to offer an apology to former students of Indian residential schools. The treatment of children in Indian residential schools is a sad chapter in our history. Two primary objectives of the residential school system were to remove and isolate children from the influence of their home, families, traditions, and cultures, and to assimilate them into the dominant culture. These objectives were based on the assumption that Aboriginal cultures and spiritual beliefs were inferior and unequal. Indeed, some sought, as was infamously said, to kill the Indian in the child. Today, we recognize that this policy of assimilation was wrong, has caused great harm, and has no place in our country.
I'm not a Canadian citizen. I'm not an American citizen. I'm a part of the circle, part of the universe, and that's a part of us.
Dramatic showdown is over a disputed piece of land outside Montreal near the town of Oka. The Mohawks of Ganasataki are protesting the planned expansion of a golf course on territory they claim. This protest explodes into a national crisis.
Coming in!
Tears from the sky and tears for fallen sisters sprinkle the downtown east side. For the past 20 years, every Valentine's Day, hundreds march in memory of the missing and murdered women of the downtown east side.
A disturbing research paper published this week shows that Canadian scientists in the 1940s and 50s used children from northern native reserves as test subjects.
Our children were literally lab rats for the most unconscionable, horrific testing.
Of course, Sean Atleo there weighing in. Milk and vitamins were withheld and children tested to see how a starvation diet affected their health, their teeth, and their work. It's believed the research continued for up to 10 years. At least 1,300 Aboriginals were involved.
Attawapiskat is a remote First Nations reserve in northern Ontario. And yesterday we gave you a glimpse of what life is like for some people in that community.
We've been talking about this house for years now. Sometimes I feel I've been overlooked.
Joseph's home is infested with mold, and like a lot.
So what went wrong? It wasn't always like this when we started down the path. When the settlers first arrived, the natives welcomed them and helped them out. It wasn't like they showed up and the natives said, uh-oh, there goes the neighborhood. And the relationship grew stronger, fashionable even. Remember these? It's a beaver hat. This was considered cool back in the day. That's right, our rodents were all the rage in 17th century Europe. That led to the fur trade, and of course the fur trade gave us Canada. For a time, the Aboriginal people had this warm and fuzzy feeling, love and understanding. We documented that in wampum belts like this one that depict two canoes traveling down the river in parallel paths, neither one interfering with the other. It's cute, eh? And the English and French, well, for their part, they signed all sorts of big agreements with great seals. Ever since the Royal Proclamation of 1763, there's been banner promises like, the natives will not be molested. Or my personal favorite, the Queen's promise to the Cree of bounty and benevolence. You know, we Aboriginal people thought we were getting a seat at the big table. But it turns out we had a reservation at a much smaller table, out the back, near the garbage cans. At the big table, they got Canada and all of its bounty. At our table, a total lack of benevolence. We got the plague, a plague of whiskey, and our parents and grandparents were molested in schools designed to kill the Indian in the child. So where did all of that go wrong? Well, step into my office, grab a seat on the big couch, and let's talk.
Well, more action is expected today on a First Nation protest that started off as a tweet and is now gaining global momentum. Thousands of Aboriginal Canadians braved the Ottawa snow yesterday to rally outside Parliament Hill as part of the Idle No More demonstrations. Organizers opposed the Harper government's recently passed omnibus budget legislation, Bill C-45, and they accused the Tories of trampling on treaty rights. Well, our next guest has been on both sides of the First Nations conversation with the government. She is a lawyer who formerly worked at Indian and Northern Affairs Canada as well as Justice Canada. She left her government position and is now helping to organize Idle No More protests across the country. Pam Palmatier joins us in studio. So good morning to you and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to begin with some basics here because, you know, we've been saying all morning that this has been fueled in some ways over the government's omnibus budget bill. Yeah. What about that bill has fueled these demonstrations?
Well, the primary issue is that there was no consultation. It was a surprise to First Nations leaders as well as community people, and it has the potential to be extremely destructive to our lands and waterways, and that's a violation of our treaty rights. But it wasn't just Bill C-45. There's 14 pieces of legislation, most very specific to First Nations communities, which is designed to both assimilate us as individuals and destroy our communities, so break up our reserve lands and leave them open to aggressive resource development without any benefit going to our communities.
Now, I know one of the demands of the Idle No More movement is to have a direct conversation with the Prime Minister. But last we heard government sources tell us, well, listen, the government's already engaged on several levels with Aboriginal groups. What's your response to that?
Well, the thing is what's happening right now isn't working. Clearly, it's not working. All of these processes that are across the country where we're sitting down with the bureaucrats talking about different proposals and economic development and negotiations that last many, many decades, that's not dealing with the housing crisis, the water crisis, sanitation, the overrepresentation in child and family services, in prisons, the fact that our people have a lifespan of up to 20 years less than regular Canadians. We're in a crisis, and nothing is being done to deal with the issue that the people are feeling. It's just these glorified processes that take many, many years, and they have nothing that come out at the end of it.
So if the Prime Minister were to agree to meet with the leaders of the No Idle movement, what form would that meeting take? How would the communication take place, and how would it be implemented?
Well, what's really being requested isn't for the Idle No More movement to meet with the Prime Minister. It's about a fundamental shift in the relationship between Canada and First Nations, and that needs to start with a nation-to-nation relationship. That's the Prime Minister, the Governor General, representatives of the provinces, and the treaty representatives, all of the First Nations leaders across the country. That's what Chief Teresa Spence is asking for. That's what we're talking about. No more bureaucrat-to-bureaucrat meetings, and certainly no national organization to bureaucrat meetings. We're talking about nation to nation, and that's the only thing that's going to bring about a fundamental shift, something that's on an equal playing field.
You mentioned Teresa Spence there, the chief from Attawapiskat. She is staging a hunger strike, day 12 of the hunger strike. I want to ask, how is she doing?
She's got very high spirits. She's very prepared. Her and her family are prepared for what could potentially come, but she is getting weaker every day. It is day 12. And if you think about what's happening with her hunger strike represents what's happening to First Nations across this country. Every day that Chief Teresa Spence doesn't eat, she's slowly dying. Well, that's what's happening to First Nations who are purposefully and chronically underfunded for things like water and food that other Canadians don't even have to worry about. Which, when you think about it, think about the treaty promise. They promised that we would both live in prosperity. We would share the lands and resources. And there's only one treaty partner that's wealthy and prosperous, and it's not First Nations.
Chief Spence, as you said, day 12, a hunger strike. These demonstrations are happening across the country, is taking place as people are literally going on Christmas break. Are you worried that your words, your messages are falling on deaf ears right now?
Not at all. Actually, our word is falling on more and more ears, and not just here in Canada. It's international now. We've had Idle No More protests and solidarity in the United States, California, Las Vegas, Nevada. You have in Ukraine, Germany, the United Kingdom, and it's spreading because people are realizing the actual injustice that's happening here in this country, and that we're not asking for anything. We're just asking for justice and a recognition of our rights, which are constitutionally protected. So that should go without saying. And so I think it's just going to get bigger.
And going in bigger, we were talking just before break, you say this is going to continue.
Oh, yeah.
Over the Christmas break and over the holidays.
Oh, it definitely is. This isn't going to stop anytime soon. We had this plan from the very beginning that it would start out with information sessions to empower both First Nations people and Canadians to know what's going on. And it would ramp up to marches, rallies, protests. Now you see blockades. And it's going to keep ramping up until Canada agrees to come to the table.
Okay, Pam, well, let's leave it there for now.
Thanks.
Thank you for this. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.